I want to start my questions for both of you by asking you a little bit about your opinions on how best to modernize the grid. And I guess I'd start out with a question that's more specific to my home state and then move on to some that are clearly a broader viewpoint for the purpose of the nation as a whole. New Mexico is fairly fortunate to have an abundant supply of a number of energy sources, in particular natural gas, solar, and wind. However, without the infrastructure to deliver that energy to markets, these resources may never be fully developed. In the West, in particular, we have long distances and very complex land ownership split between private, state, federal, throw in Department of Defense as a whole additional layer of federal. And I'd like to know from each of you your thoughts on how the Commission can help promote investment in new interstate transmission capacity. Mr. Bay, we'll start with you and then go to Ms. LaFleur.
I think there are a few generic factors that I would look to if confirmed. One would be to make sure that we provide as much regulatory certainty as possible to transmission developers, particularly with respect to rates, terms, and conditions of service. Second, FERC does have the ability to offer incentives for transmission development, and so that's something, that's a tool in the toolkit that upon the proper showing by the developer, that incentive might be available. I think a third thing that FERC can do is to ensure that its review of the proposals is always thorough, professional, and prompt. And finally, I would say that there is always the possibility of looking for additional efficiencies, looking for additional ways to streamline the process. That may involve changes within FERC, although my own personal view is that staff at FERC is outstanding, particularly in those offices. But it may be that there are ways of working with other key stakeholders where the process can be facilitated. In that regard, I read that the White House has issued an executive order requiring federal agencies to streamline the permitting process, and I think that's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Ms. LaFleur.
Thank you, Senator. I think there's a number of things that FERC can do to help modernize the grid through its oversight of interstate transmission. One of the major initiatives we've been working on is Order 1000, which requires regional planning and cost allocation to try to make sure the region plans together with so much money going into transmission. New Mexico's in the West Connect region with a wealth of renewables to plan for, and the order requires that public policy requirements like renewable standards be considered. Secondly, as Mr. Bay alluded to, we do regulate transmission rates. That's both base ROE and incentives that Mr. Domenici and his colleagues gave us in 2005 the right to give out incentives. That includes incentives for advanced transmission technologies. And finally, a lot of what I would call the geeky market rules really impact how easy it is to build and connect renewables and transmission in places like New Mexico, requiring more frequent transmission scheduling and shorter increments, streamlined rules for storage and ancillary services in the West. Some of these energy geek rules, I call, really affect how feasible it is to bring in the new technologies.
Do you think those regional orders are working well?
I think it has great potential. I think in so far what we've seen is that in the parts of the country that already had regional markets and regional planning have taken the next step and are doing competitive transmission solicitation already under Order 1000. In the parts of the country like New Mexico that had bilateral markets are a little earlier in their process, but the potential is very great.
Thank you.